The public is being conditioned to look at the sky. U.S. Northern Command establishes Joint Task Force Gold, a hardening of homeland air and missile defense. This is a calculated distraction. The kinetic cost of a missile strike is high. The political fallout, guaranteed. This is not the primary vector. The first strike in 21st century warfare is not a launch. It is an erasure. The global financial system is not located in New York or London. It exists as light pulses inside a few hundred fiber optic cables on the ocean floor. These are the arteries of global commerce, processing trillions in transactions per day. They are fragile, unmonitored, and accessible. The cost to sever these vectors is near zero. The outcome is a systemic solvency crisis. Simultaneously, the orbital layer is targeted, not with kinetic kill vehicles, but with silent warfare. Dazzling lasers, GPS spoofing, and high-powered microwave weapons blind the satellites that form the central nervous system of the Western military and economy. This is the blueprint for cyber insecurity that analysts at Davos now rank as a higher probability than conventional war. The result is not rubble. It is paralysis, a blind leviathan, a superpower with the world's most advanced military, unable to see, to communicate, or to transact. Its markets are frozen, its fleets are deaf, its advanced society a terminal liability. Only then, with the nation systemically broken, is the nuclear threat deployed as the final leverage point to force capitulation. The motive is not conquest, it is survival. A state actor facing a domestic solvency crisis, where internal liabilities and the immense kinetic cost of an unpopular war threaten the regime's stability, is mathematically incentivized to externalize that crisis. Reports from authorities like CSIS have analyzed this dynamic within Russia, framing the conflict not as a simple war of aggression, but as a desperate bid to manage catastrophic internal pressures. When you are conventionally outmatched and fiscally broken, symmetric warfare is a terminal diagnosis. The pivot to asymmetry is not a choice, it is a protocol dictated by weakness. The objective shifts from battlefield victory to inducing a mirrored solvency event in the adversary. You cannot afford to destroy their army, so you seek to bankrupt their system. This blueprint weaponizes fragility. The initial vectors are non-kinetic strikes against the most vulnerable, high-leverage nodes of a complex society, its digital infrastructure, and its energy supply chain. The goal is to trigger a cascading failure, a systemic paralysis where the interconnectedness of an advanced nation becomes its primary liability. Source: 2-4. The hardening of the U.S. homeland via new military structures, like Joint Task Force Gold, is not a precautionary measure. It is a direct reaction to the proven viability of this protocol. Source number 3. The final stage, the threat of limited nuclear strikes, is not an act of insanity. It is the ultimate leverage, a launch-on-warning threat deployed only after the target is already systemically crippled and its leadership is facing a national collapse. To force capitulation. Source: 01. This is how weakness is converted into a zero-sum weapon. The math of modern warfare is no longer calculus, it is brutal division. According to analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, the kinetic cost structure has been inverted. A $5 million main battle tank can be neutralized by a $500 first-person view drone. This is not an outlier. It is the new baseline exchange rate for asset liquidation. This economic asymmetry enables a protocol known as the democratization of violence, the capacity to project lethal force once the exclusive domain of state-level industrial powers has been commoditized. The barrier to entry for inflicting strategic damage has collapsed to near zero. A non-state actor or a conventionally weaker state can now field a swarm of these low-cost systems to overwhelm a target's multi-billion-dollar defenses. This protocol is mathematically incentivized. Why engage in a symmetrical, high-cost kinetic exchange when you can bleed your adversary through 1,000 cheap cuts? Each drone strike forces the target to expend a disproportionately expensive interceptor, accelerating a solvency crisis within their defense industrial base. The objective is not to win on the battlefield, but to bankrupt the opponent before the real battle ever begins. The drone is merely the delivery mechanism for the initial phase of asymmetric escalation. Its purpose is to degrade and paralyze, targeting critical nodes like power grids and logistics hubs, vectors identified in cyber and resource warfare doctrines. This creates the systemic fragility required for the final checkmate, forcing a capitulation under the leverage of a limited nuclear threat. The $500 drone doesn't win the war, it just sets the price of defeat. The regional instability you are shown is not the disease, it is the petri dish. Reports of supply chain disruptions, energy grid failures, and civil unrest in nations from the global south to the west are not isolated events. They are gray zone operations, live-fire laboratories for a new class of weapon. The objective is to beta test systemic collapse at a controlled scale. The energy crisis in Cuba, engineered through the restriction of Venezuelan oil, is not a tragedy of local mismanagement. It is a blueprint. It demonstrates the mathematical formula for paralyzing a nation-state by attacking a single critical dependency. Source: Your 4. This is resource warfare perfected. These proxy laboratories allow state actors with a conventional deficit to refine their primary non-kinetic vectors, cyber and economic warfare. The goal is to identify the precise digital choke points and liquidity drains that can induce a solvency crisis faster than a kinetic response can be mounted. This is why cyber insecurity now outranks conventional warfare in strategic threat assessments. Source number 2. The viability of this protocol is no longer theoretical. The U.S. Department of Defense's creation of Joint Task Force Gold under NORTHCOM is the receipt. Source number 3. This is not a routine administrative update. It is the systemic hardening of the U.S. homeland in direct response to the weapons being perfected in these gray zones. They are preparing for strikes that do not arrive by missile. Therefore, the theater of operations is not a future battlefield. It is now. These proxy conflicts are rehearsals, refining the asymmetric playbook that turns an adversary's complexity into a terminal liability, long before the final nuclear leverage is even considered. Source number 1. The test subjects are failing states. The ultimate target is you. The launch-on-warning doctrine is not a choice. It is a protocol of mathematical necessity. It dictates that a nation's nuclear arsenal must be deployed the instant an inbound kinetic strike is detected, but before impact. The logic is zero-sum. Fail to launch, and your strategic deterrent is neutralized in its silos. The kinetic cost of hesitation is absolute. This is where the protocol of asymmetric escalation finds its ultimate leverage. A non-kinetic vector, a cyber attack, now a primary threat vector for nation-states, source number 2, is deployed not against the missiles, but against the digital nervous system of the early warning architecture. The commander is now blind, facing a solvency crisis of information. This is the fog of digital war. The adversary weaponizes uncertainty itself, forcing the defender into an impossible binary choice. Gamble on a system malfunction and risk total decapitation, or execute the launch protocol based on a data phantom. This induced paralysis is the strategic goal, creating the precondition for coercion where the threat of a limited strike, as articulated by strategists like Karaganov, source number 1, becomes the final, irrefutable checkmate. The protocol of asymmetric escalation requires a test phase. Before a systemic strike, an actor must measure two variables: the target's fragility and its response latency. This is a mathematical prerequisite. The defensive hardening of the U.S. homeland via entities like Joint Task Force Gold, source number 3, is not a deterrent. It is the system being calibrated against. The calibration forecast for the next 12 months is a targeted, non-kinetic probe engineered to appear as an anomaly. Expect a coordinated, attribution-impossible cascade failure targeting the digital logistics and local power grid of the Los Angeles-Long Beach port complex. This vector leverages both cyber and resource fragility, source number 2 near 4. The objective is not kinetic cost, but systemic paralysis. The primary metric is not damage, but time. The adversary will measure the latency between initial system failure and a coherent federal response. This data is the true prize, validating the blueprint for a future nationwide solvency crisis. The event will be framed as a freak accident. It is an act of measurement,